Right. Well, hello, and thank you to everyone who's joining us on today's call. This is really an important topic, and today's conversation couldn't come at a more urgent moment. I especially want to thank Stella Keating and her mom, Lisa Keating, who are both constituents of mine and a real powerhouse mother-daughter duo in the fight for civil rights. Thank you to both of you. I also want to thank Adam and Amber, their parents to a trans son in Texas, who are here and bravely speaking out against a governor who's determined to scapegoat trans kids in the most despicable way. And of course, thank you to Sarah. She's the legal director for the Human Rights Campaign, which has been a real force in the fight for equality. So I wanted to bring all of us today together because certain politicians in this country are determined to target trans people and trans kids in particular. They're taking something many Americans probably don't think about much in their day-to-day, gender identity, and they're not only engaging in hateful rhetoric to rile up extremists, they are determined to misuse the law and their legal authority to attack trans children and their families. In Texas, Governor Greg Abbott made the decision to actively investigate and target parents of transgender kids and providers for what the governor is falsely calling child abuse. It is reprehensible and it is dangerous. In other states around the country with Republican-run legislatures, lawmakers are close to passing bills that would criminalize providing gender-affirming care. And in Florida, a bill is headed to the governor's desk that is meant to erase gay and trans kids, parents, and teachers from our schools. This is all really, really disturbing, especially for families. It feels like far-right lawmakers are in a race to legislate the most extreme, most hateful bills they can think of, all at the expense of trans kids. So to me, it has never been more important that lawmakers and leaders everywhere in this country speak out. We all have a responsibility to stand up and say, this is not right. Trans people are our friends, they're our neighbors, they're our family. Trans kids deserve to be just kids, to play sports, to go to school, to see a doctor, to get health care without discrimination. And parents deserve to be able to make their own parenting decisions with their medical providers to do what's best for their kids' health. They should not have to worry about what a right-wing politician thinks. They should not live in fear that a state legislature is going to intervene in their parenting decisions and hurt their child. It is really that simple. So here's the deal. We've got to fight these attacks on trans kids every way we can in the courts, with legislation, through executive action, and by speaking out and speaking up. Because attacks on trans kids crosses state borders. What Greg Abbott says about trans kids carries weight. I wish it didn't. But the truth is that that kind of hateful rhetoric, those attacks, is that all these measures are not only really scary for trans families across the country, but they also embolden more hateful rhetoric and even violence against trans people. And it is harming trans kids' mental health, no matter where they live. So look, we've got to be louder than Greg Abbott or whoever is taking aim at trans kids. I need every lawmaker who thinks he and politicians like him are wrong to speak up, say something about this, because kids in Washington State, kids in New York, kids in New Jersey are not living in a bubble. This is not the moment to be quiet. The kids and families in our states need to hear us speaking up and being on their side. So I'm going to be pushing the Biden administration to make sure they are doing everything, absolutely everything they can to protect trans kids. I'll be fighting to make sure that we are looking at every legislative option to protect trans kids. And while the Equality Act isn't the answer to everything, it does send an important statement that treating people differently because of their sexual orientation or gender identity is discrimination. My colleagues and I, as you know, are working hard to bring more Republican support to this bill so we can get it over the finish line. But while we do all of that, we have got to stand up and push back when any politician attacks trans kids. So Stella, Lisa, Adam, Amber, I am so looking forward to hearing from each of you. And I really want to thank you today for your willingness to share your stories and your perspective. It makes a big difference. It makes a huge difference. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my constituents, Stella and Lisa Keating.
Thank you so much, Senator Murray. It's an absolute honor to be here today. And I'm so incredibly grateful that you're creating this space that allows me to share my story. And I'm especially excited that I'll be able to that I'll get to do it with my mom as well. You know, it's been a really difficult year for transgender and non-binary youth, as you've said, and it's been really difficult to find hope sometimes. But I've also, in that, I've still been able to find hope, thankfully. And one thing that's been bringing me hope is the recent Gallup poll that was released. And what stuck out to me the most about that was that 21% of my generation identifies as LGBTQ, and that's huge. It also reinforces what I already know and experience every single day. And we also get to watch thousands of students across Florida take a stand against the Don't Say Gay bill that passed. And these are my peers using their voice, like me, to stand up for what is just and for the world that actually is today. There is a lot of harmful legislation and directives across the country. Listening and reading that my own parents are considered child abusers and that my healthcare providers are seen by some as criminals for simply loving, supporting, and helping me live the best possible life, it's impossible to describe. Ultimately, I know that these opinions are wrong and that they are just that, opinions. Opinions cannot stop us from existing. They cannot stop me from living my dream to the fullest and following all of my dreams. And opinions do not change who we are as transgender and non-binary people. You know, a year ago, I stepped out onto the world stage and I made history. I spoke out and I shared my story and shared why I need the Equality Act passed. And yet, in a year's time, here we are right back where we started. A year ago, there was the same attacks on transgender and non-binary youth, and in the same year's time, the solution stays the same. I am honestly disappointed that I find myself back where I was a year ago, asking for the same thing again. What I and my fellow LGBTQ peers need from the Senate is to pass the Equality Act now. 21% of my generation is not going away. And we are going to continue to speak up, and we are going to continue to lead. And Senator Murray, I am so proud to have a senator like you leading the way. And thank you so much for helping show the world why this Equality Act matters and why it needs to be passed. Thank you, Senator. And I want to pass it over to my mom now.
Hard to not get emotional to listening to your child. I would add that I would also just want to extend my gratitude, Senator Murray. You for years have stood alongside families, our own family and families across Washington State and throughout the country. And I know that personally. I've had many conversations with you, and you've given me a lot of hope and strength to continue to share who we are and share our families' experiences, because we're not alone. We're not a small minority of families. There are thousands and thousands of us in every single state in this country, in every community, rural, urban, suburban, we're everywhere. Our kids are in every school across this country. And I think that what is using our families as political wedge issues and to try and weaponize an agenda is not only cruel, but in our house, we believe that's un-American, because we are supposed to have the same freedoms and access that anyone else should. If you believe in an American dream, I don't understand how year after year we continue to try and plea with the opposition that We are families that are just like families in your own community, in your own neighborhoods. And I also, it's been a grueling 2.5 months following the legislation and the impacts of the legislation. And I think it's really important to your point, Senator, about that what is happening in Texas, what is happening in Florida, in Alabama, in Idaho, in South Dakota, like they impact trans kids in every single state and families like ours everywhere. They don't just stop at the borders of those states, because it sends a really powerful message that our families don't belong, that our kids don't belong, and that there's something wrong with us. And we know that that's not true. Stella is evident that that is not true. And I think that Stella and the kids that keep standing up, that keep showing up and saying, hey, this isn't the world that we want. This isn't the world that we're going to tolerate. We are not going to stop fighting for the world that includes us, and that not just includes us, but that celebrates us. And the Equality Act isn't going to fix everything, and it is going to help significantly slow down the onslaught of these harmful years-long attacks of legislation to try and silence us and silence our kids. And that's just not gonna, we're not going anywhere. Like Stella said, her generation is here and they're gonna lead the way, and they should be the ones that inspire us as the adults to do what's best for all kids. And I'm really honored to be here with my dear friends, Adam and Amber. I apologize. And I would like to pass it over to them.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you. My name is Adam Briggle.
I'm Amber.
We're also grateful for this opportunity.
Thank you.
We're parents of a transgender child in Texas. We live in the Dallas area, North Texas. We've come out publicly with our situation. Amber's going to tell you about it in a second, but I think it's important for us to say, and first of all, we don't have any prepared remarks. Sorry, we're just speaking from the heart. We're kind of living this now. We've been publicly advocating for trans rights in Texas for 7 years now. Especially Amber has been just a real champion. And it's been what we call a long political emergency, from attack to attack to attack. We totally agree with what Lisa's saying about Stella and these other youth who are leading the way. We've learned from our son how to just love somebody unconditionally, and it's really his courage that has got us to this point, I would say. So we're so grateful for that generation teaching us what it means to love somebody. But I would say, before passing off to Amber, it just feels like the pressure is increasingly mounting, and we've never felt this threatened before. Mm-hmm. It's very scary. I feel like we're at a tipping point, and I'm so glad that we're calling national attention to this.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, to piggyback off of what Adam was saying, I mean, this didn't happen overnight. This was a steady drumbeat and a rising temperature, lots of pressure put on trans kids and trans people across the country. I remember the first time we really spoke publicly was probably in 2016. It was before the bathroom bills were going to be filed in Texas. That in Texas, we have a legislative session every 2 years. So in 2017, it was the bathroom bill fight. In 2019, it was religious refusal bills. In 2021, it was, anti-trans sports bills and anti-trans medical bills, labeling parents like us child abusers. So like it just keeps, the pressure keeps mounting. So I'm really, really glad that America is waking up, because parents of transgender kids have been begging for help for years. So thank you, Senator Murray, for having us here today. We are under investigation by CPS for being the loving parents of a transgender child. The extra ironic thing about this is State Attorney General Ken Paxton actually came to our home for dinner in 2016 specifically to meet our transgender child. And it was only after Greg Abbott directed CPS to start investigating families like ours. It was literally the day after we had a call, and we had a CPS worker in our home on March 2nd, interrogating us and our children. There is an injunction currently, but Adam and I both feel it's just borrowed time. We're very grateful to the ACLU and to Lambda Legal for fighting for families like ours and helping that injunction at least put a pause on this investigation, but it does not close our case. Ken Paxton has appealed the injunction. Who's to say we could win in July? I really hope that we do. But even if we do, I mean, who's to say that the Texas legislature won't try this again in 2023, right? So to Lisa's point, there's states across the country that are trying to pass bills that are meant to erase trans kids and break the hearts of loving parents like us. In Idaho, they're trying to make this a life sentence. So this is not just Texas. And when people ask us to move, they're like, why don't you move? And we're like, tell us where is safe. Nowhere is safe until everywhere is safe. And we really desperately need the Equality Act and everyone in all of our elected officials in Washington, D.C. to use every tool in their toolbox to make sure that kids like our son can be safe and protected, make sure that kids like Stella can be safe and protected. And I could keep going, but I'm probably going to cry. So I'm going to step back now. And thank you again for this opportunity. I'm going to pass it off to my hero, Sarah, at the Human Rights Campaign.
Thanks, Amber. You know, I mean, what parents are going through and trans youth are going through across this country is unprecedented. We went through a time in which, little by little, there was more and more space for trans people to be themselves, to operate more safely in society. And now we have governors and legislators across this country that are hell-bent on rolling back the clock and making it impossible for transgender people, particularly transgender youth, to operate and function in our society. It is their number one goal is to erase trans people from existence, to make it so that people can't even support their loved ones who are trans. In each and every state legislative session that we have seen over the past couple of years, the stakes have gotten higher. There's been acceleration in the scope of the legislation, in the penalties that we are seeing. Amber mentioned we are now seeing criminalization that includes life sentences. That is something that was unheard of even 2 years ago. And that's why we have to come together as a country to use every tool in our toolbox. You know, Senator, as you said, whether it's federal legislation, whether it's administrative action, litigation, we have to be fighting on all cylinders in order to tackle this problem. There's no one magic bullet. The Equality Act is a critical piece of this puzzle, but it alone cannot stop what we are seeing in the states. We need every single tool and every single person fighting on behalf of trans kids, their families, their doctors, and everyone who is trying to ensure their success in life. I'm here today as a legal expert and mostly, here to answer any technical questions that may come up, but I am also the parent of a transgender child. And it doesn't matter where in the country these attacks are happening, they're terrifying for every transgender young person. Thank you.